Richard, welcome. Good to see you.
Hi, how you doing?
Pretty excellent, actually, considering my age and the price of fish. Andrew and I were absolutely delighted that you would help us out to get this series launched. So thanks for that. And as we're starting the new year, we decided that this was the year of radical revolution rather than don't rock the boat too much in case we all fall in the water. So I remember from the work that we've done in the past and the contacts we've had in the past that you have strong opinions about that sort of bringing commercial and business thinking into councils rather than just tinkering at the edges with this is the way we do things here. So anyway, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here and see you both.
I'm sure you really mean that, Richard.
I do for once.
Yeah.
So anyway, over the lockdown, you've been working really hard on your own business ventures and engaging quite a lot with council. So do you want to give us a couple of minutes thoughts over what you've learned from those for the last couple of years and maybe what you think you want to do this year?
Last couple of years, yeah. I think really, I mean, obviously everyone talks about digital being this new big thing and that digital transformation moved forward 20 years within 2 years in COVID. But ultimately, I think if you look at most examples, by digital transformation, most people mean we rolled out Teams and then we gave people a laptop to work from home and they connect via VPN to the corporate network. It's not really been used as a tool to deliver a service in a brand new way. There have been new services built. They've had to build, obviously, like the COVID forms and trackers and various other bits. That's been really good. But fundamentally, once you strip those away, the amount of change that's happened underneath it is relatively small. I've done some in the third sector, working with charities that really were behind the times, shall we say, even to the point of having desktops in the office left on almost with a post-it note on saying, please don't turn this PC off because someone was remoting into it from home. And we've looked at cloud systems with them. We've upgraded them, moved them into a more modern world that is accessible from anywhere. But again, that's one shift forwards. It's not necessarily let's transform the entire way the organization works. It's given them a platform to now review how they work and what they look like going forwards. And I think in councils and local government, they've probably got that platform as well. They're still lacking kind of the knowledge, the desire, the appetite to say, actually, we need to deliver this in a fundamentally radical way. And digital is the way that's going to do it. And the only way that's going to happen is by bringing kind of like the digital IT knowledge together with the business knowledge, merging that and going, right, how do the two work together to deliver this? Because kind of whatever comes out the back of it, the change to how you work, the people change and the process change is probably going to take you 5 times as long as implementing the tech. And too often we see digital as we've implemented the tech, it's gone live, right, we'll move on to the next project, rather than saying, actually, this 3-month implementation is actually a 12-month project so that we realize all the benefits and the outcomes we expected. And I think that's the thing that really needs to change moving forwards.
Do you see digital as power within the council, or do you see it as a capability that enables the radical and new thinking that a council has to undertake?
Yeah, I think it can be both. I think it definitely is more of the enabler to delivering a service in a different way. And I think too many have, I'm going to use your words again, tinkered around the edges rather than fundamentally changed how they deliver a service. There are some elements where we've automated tasks and we've done everything, but I was talking actually to one this morning when we were talking about Uber, and although it's probably overused in terms of examples of digital transformation, if you actually look at what they've done and how they've done it, it's a really useful model to follow. So if you now go on the website and type www.uber.com and try and book a taxi on the website, you can't do it. The website is for information about Uber as a company, how you become a driver for them, and it's purely about passing knowledge on of how you work for Uber, how the service works. If you want to book a taxi, you download an app and you go on the app, and the app effectively is a marketplace that says, I'm a buyer, I'm in this location, I would like to go to that location, and I'm happy to give someone some money to do it. The other end, you've got a seller, guy sitting in a car who obviously the job pops up, he accepts it, and then between the two of you, there's data transfer that gives your location, their location in real time, how much it's going to cost, you get out. And the bit that people miss is at no point during that transaction have I spoken to or dealt with anyone who works for Uber. We're assuming the driver's kind of self-employed or whatever rules they use. But at no point has anyone from Uber I haven't gone through a call center, it's not gone into a CRM, it's not a form that I've had to download and fill in and do everything else. It is a 0-person process. And that's where councils need to radically think, what is the most kind of efficient way of passing data? It's not a buyer and seller, it's a service and a service user. What's the most efficient way of doing that? Because that is how you'll start to transform how you deliver services. And you start from the point of how do we do this with no people involved and build up to kind of the minimum amount you need. Whereas I think we start with, right, well, we've got a contact center of 30 people, we've got a forms package and we've got a CRM, let's build a form. And again, it all gets kind of intermixed and mingled up with a website that kind of should be there for informational purposes, because every other page we've put a transactional page in it and buried them within this site. So there's huge amounts of learning you can take from the private sector. We might not like Uber, what they do, how they work or operate, but the fundamental digital model of what they do is actually very good. And we've kind of, I think, fallen into a trap of every council has a website, has hundreds of forms. I think I've seen up to 280 forms in some councils on their websites, one for everything. But half the time they don't really go anywhere or do anything, or we haven't automated the full journey and the full process behind it. And that's one of the big things that can change with digital and the business coming together to say, almost your starting point, how do we deliver this service when no one has to touch it?
Richard, do you think that the reticence of the full project, you mentioned 3 months for the digital, and well, could be forever for the cultural and the systems changes, because people commissioning this work, however senior they are, perhaps the mission isn't as strong as we must reduce our overall cost by a third. And in the private sector, you might do that because you want to make more profit, because your costs are your costs, and you're not going to make any money if you don't sell anything, this buying and selling thing. You must reduce the friction it takes for your customer to engage with you, hence the Uber example. And if you had that mission of, I must, reduce my cost but increase satisfaction, so I must change up how people do the job they do, or even not have anybody literally in the office, because that's a bit of a sacred cow with, we must employ as many people and we can't make them unemployed and blah, blah, blah. Is that holding local authorities back? Because the true mission's too scary, whereas the digital one is quite sexy because you can make things go faster or more efficienter, but it doesn't actually change what we're doing. We don't want to change what we're doing.
Yeah, and I've got a book called The Road Less Stupid by an American businessman called Keith Cunningham. And there's a chapter in that called Generalizations Kill Clarity. And that's one of the problems. And we'll get to digital strategies, I'm sure, at some point. But in that, he basically says, put a number on it. So where you say we want to be more efficient, put a number against it and say we want to be more efficient by 10%, 15%, 20%, or number of hours that we need to reduce. So that when you do then run a digital project, you then run the kind of the change project alongside and following, you're looking at the benefits kind of like maybe 6 months, 9 months, 12 months down the line and saying, did we hit the target of 10%? Because too many don't really know the starting point anyway. I've had many councils say, you'll read this in loads of strategies, we want to improve customer experience. And it's like, based on what? It's like, do you want 4 out of 5 or 8 out of 10 stars? Because the way to get 8 out of 10 is to say yes to everything. If you want 10 out of 10, which is what they all go, oh, we want great customer experience, that's fine, but it's going to cost you £3 million to implement it. We can't afford that. So, okay, so you only want 7 out of 10 then. And actually, what benefits do you get as a council for being a 9 out of 10 customer experience? Are you hitting your budgets now because you get 9 out of 10 or not?
Can you monetize that?
Yeah, so you need to flip the thinking around a little bit. And all right, customer first. I've got a podcast that says customer second. And again, don't write a strategy that says we're putting the customer second. But in a commercial world, I can spend as much money as I need to on customer experience if that customer comes back and spends more money with me, and he spends more money than it's costing me to deliver that service. In the council world, you can't do that. So you can only deliver the service kind of that you can afford to deliver, rather than almost keep pumping money into that front end, because actually, if I get that customer back, he might tell a friend, they might tell a friend, and suddenly a restaurant has 50 people queuing outside. The council, you almost want the opposite. You don't want anyone queuing outside. You need to be able to deal with them in a way that deals with their problem fully and completely, but in a way that is also affordable to you. And it's a slightly different way of thinking about how you deliver digital.
Do you think that this sort of more agile, more expertise oriented, smaller team, that type of environment, which I endorse 110%, do you think that has a place within the traditional IT department of a local authority, or do you actually go ahead and implement it as economically and as rapidly as you possibly can? Paying the right wages, but smaller teams, so you get there quicker and get to the gains, before they go stale. Do you think that sits comfortably with an IT, or do you do it anyway and then tell them, look what we've done?
I wouldn't do it anyway. I think there has to be kind of buy-in. So I have a framework anyway, which I won't call agile. I'll say brings a level of agility into a council. And by that, what I mean is a traditional digital strategy, you can probably spend up to 100 grand on having a beautiful PowerPoint presentation by one of the big four that goes in the drawer and is never seen again. And actually, if that strategy says our strategy is we're going cloud, when you get to write the business case, it's very difficult to write a business case if the cloud solution is more expensive than the one you've already got. It falls on its feet day one. Whereas I come at it from, if you would get the strategy right and you have, what do we want to achieve either as a council or department, list of the problems of what's stopping you from achieving that, and then kind of a list of actions you can take. You can take that action, make it into an annual plan of what can we actually resource, how many people do we have, what can we build, what gives us the most bang for our buck. And then the business case that you're writing becomes, we're investing this amount of money in this solution, basically because we've identified a problem stopping, say, housing from achieving what they need to do. That's a very easy business case to sign off. You then deliver that, and then you revisit the benefits and the outcomes because you've identified the problem up front. So when you get to the end of the project, it's not we've gone live with a brand new system. It's we've gone live with a system. That's an outcome. The desired outcome was we wanted to reduce homelessness by 15%. Have we managed to do that? Yes or no? And if not, what kind of changes do we need to make to that? So for me, I think there's a level of agility, I'm going to say, that you can put into just how you work as an organization. But I would also kind of merge any digital work with a change team, with a PMO, because it needs to be looking at a bigger picture than just what the digital bits give you. So one council I'm working with have a huge transformation program going on. Actually, they identify what's the ambition of the department. They identify what are the problems that are stopping that department from achieving their ambition. And then when they bring that list of actions, kind of like 2/3 of them are going to be people and process actions, and 1/3 of them are going to be digital actions. So even though we've delivered the digital, we can always come back to, have we delivered the entirety of the project, not just this one small element? And I think if you leave it too much with IT will go off and do what they think is right, not necessarily what gives you the 15% cut, the 10% cut, or anything else. And that's the bit that makes you accountable at the end for the entire project happening in the first place.
That's very, very helpful, switch of looking at desired outcomes, the digital outcomes, and whether the organization is actually winning, with this digital input. The other day, there was a supplement. I actually nearly posted it on LinkedIn, but I couldn't think of anything more clever to say, but it was from someone very clever in the supplement. There was a digital supplement in the Sunday Times, raconteur, and it said, digital strategy that doesn't change the nature of the business is just an IT project. And a lot of this confusion of, we need to call it digital because that's where the clever words are, is if it's IT, be honest and call it IT. If it's, we've got blue screens, we want green screens, don't be guilty of over-egging it. Just call it that, because that's necessary in terms of keeping the system going. And when you mention cloud, it's quite interesting. The times I've tried to do a business case saying, you don't measure cloud just by how much per seat you're being charged for this new thing. You do it by how much more the service can expand and be anywhere, anytime, and it's very hard to quantify that. But as you helpfully have said, if you work on the benefits of the organization, fewer homelessness cases missed or more rents retrieved for the inputs we've got, then people do recognize those things. But I do think it needs a bit of leadership to have the courage to talk about the way you're doing it, which is the outcome focus, rather than just picking on the digital thing because it's shiny.
Well, I mean, again, it's two examples from same council. One was, we basically said our digital strategy is almost 100% based on your transformation program, because they're the ones who are going to identify the problems. And someone did say, well, what if government funding becomes available for a project? And it's like, well, is it solving a problem? Yes or no? If it's solving a problem and there's funding available and it means you don't have to spend your own money, absolutely. If there's government funding available and it means you're having to stop projects that are solving a problem because you've just gone, well, there's 100 grand in, probably come back to a chat about profit and everything else. You've got some income in, but actually it's taken staff off the work you're meant to be doing, then you don't do it. And similarly, someone also said, well, what about in planning? No one's going to come forward in planning and say, well, we want to start using drones, for example, for surveys and stuff. And it's like, well, that's kind of digital's role, is to find those solutions. But if you come to us and say one of the problems stopping us from doing planning applications in 30 days as opposed to 50 days is that we have to send an officer out to each site and we have to book someone to go up on the roof and we have to do these surveys, what action can you do to solve the problem? Then your digital team should say, one of the things we can look at is it worth using drones? And then we build a business case for, okay, the cost of a drone plus an operator is X. How much time, effort, money does that actually save us? And it just makes everything flow much easier. I always say the business case should be a story. And the story is, we've done a piece of work, this is what we've found, and therefore investing this amount of money gives you an ROI of X. But if you've got a strategy, like I said, that's just kind of buzzword bingo on terms and phrases that are loosely linked, then you're going to struggle when you get to that side of it to say, this is how much money I need to invest and the outcome is this, but the outcome is defined by the business, by them changing how they work. Otherwise, all you're going to do is pump lots and lots of money into digital and sit there and go, well, I can't believe we've not made any savings. I've got 375 forms on my website. Why hasn't that eased the pressure? And again, I think I've spoken to you before about my McDonald's Michelin star restaurant kind of model of supply and demand. And all we're actually doing is making the supply on a website 24/7, but the demand is coming through to a service that runs like a Michelin-starred restaurant, and you can't keep up with it. So you're actually compromising your own service by making it too easy to fill in forms and everything else without doing the necessary business change, the automations, AI and RPA and all those bits.
One thing that I've been sort of pondering over as you've been walking us through those scenarios is when you decide, or when you are, if you like, building a strategy before you facilitate it with digital, when you're building that strategy, who's involved in the building typically, and how much does it permeate the actual operators of the service that you're building the case for?
Yeah, everyone's involved in it, and this again is the problem: is IT will sit and write a strategy of their own and just say this is what we want in our IT or digital strategy, but your strategy is based off countless conversations, or should be based off countless conversations. So again, I'm sure you've both read my book. The first step in the methodology is discuss, and it is go and have conversations with people. Go and ask them, what are the problems? What are the headaches? When are you rekeying information? When are you having to use spreadsheets outside your core system? What's stopping you from doing X, Y, and Z? It's only when you have those conversations that you can then kind of come back to them. And it's not then it's just another IT project because they've seen a shiny tool. It's IT are building me something because I told them this was a problem. And again, the adoption then becomes much easier and simpler as you go forward. But if you're not communicating and talking to everyone constantly, I think there's a bit of an issue. And this is why, again, I advocate that the kind of the action element of your digital strategy should be a live document rather than something that's PDF'd and on a website or in a drawer, because you should be constantly going back to it and going, we had this conversation 6 months ago, a year ago. Is that still the case? What needs to happen? What needs to change? And the speed at which tech moves. I mean, 3 weeks ago, no one had ever heard of ChatGPT, and now it's every other LinkedIn post is talking about it. But so the speed at which tech moves, you can't just say, right, here's a 5-year fixed strategy. What I have is kind of like a section that talks about the overall ambition of the council, a bit of a vision, mission statement, what we want to achieve with digital. I have a set of guiding principles that go in that kind of keep you on the straight and narrow when you're looking at tools. At one council, we've then got kind of like a blueprint that sets out the different tools that they've currently got, the ecosystem, how they can merge it. So when you're then talking and saying, what action are we going to take? You go, right, we think we're going to do this project. That aligns with the guiding principles. It works with the blueprint we've got. That's one that is kind of valid to move forwards with as a kind of outline business case. So it's all based off conversations and discussions.
But it's more than that. You're actively promoting this from a consultant's point of view. You're challenging ideas, and that sounds fantastic. I was going to ask David, in taking Richard's point about a dynamic plan, which you check almost every day, did we actually get, did this work? When we press this button, did a light bulb go off? In the private sector with and people say, oh, it's so different there, but where you're running a business, a startup, or even a big business, surely people are checking things every day. Did we get more? Did we retain those customers from last week, or did we make more profit? Rather than we'll just wait. The PDFs on it must get right because we just do the same thing we did last year, next year. Is it true the private sector is more dynamic, or are there some laggards in that sector as well that don't check whether things are working?
I think there's less probably in the private sector because of the profit motive, and I know a lot of local authorities would interject at that very point and say, let me stop you there, we're not here to make a profit. Sorry, but you are, because that's the only way you're ever going to reduce council tax. That's the only way that you're going to reduce your borrowing. That's the only way, and so on and so forth. And they prefer to say, well, actually, that's what council tax is for, so that we can give everything away for free, which obviously is self-defeating. But coming back to your question, yeah, I think there is more agility, and I know I'm sort of banging on about that. They're also involved in what's the purpose. So we're not in business just to be in business. We're not in business just to take a salary every year. We want to grow. We want to dominate. We want to exit. We want a lifestyle business, and so on and so forth. We want to pass our business on to our children. So they are very, very clear in the private sector what their purpose is. And anything that's not core to their purpose, then they will spin out often. So, and I know you and I have talked about this, Andrew, that sometimes you actually do get a spin out because it's not core. And one of the local authorities that we know and love, very, very hierarchical, and the services that they give are universal rather than being selective. So that's the difference, I think, in the private sector. You're not trying to have a bland service to everybody. What you're trying to do is to provide different service levels that are profitable, and the profit can be called something else. It can be, the profit can be called a reinvestment fund. It can be an enterprise dividend. Call it what you like, but if the bottom line isn't black, you're in shit street.
In the last podcast, we talked about a Project Black I tried to implement in Aylesbury, which was, what if we had more income than our costs? But no councils in the black, because even those that think they're reducing their council tax, will not be running their services, based on a panoply of sort of discretionary companies that are earning enough for them to run for nothing. So wondering what it would take to run the business in the black is a great sort of focus. And Richard, you mentioned that phrase about, what's your, from generalist to specific, what's your ratio we're going to work out? And it reminds me of Good to Great, which I tried to use, the Jim Collins book when we were in Aylesbury, about what's your killer ratio, what per X? And it's very difficult in the public sector because obviously there's social value, et cetera. And we did touch last week on our other podcast, David, on what's the difference between valuing a public sector product, which you can value in your bones, how quality of your nursing, and we want clean streets. But what would you do when faced with the price of that product? Oh, I'm not paying that because that's too much. Compared to what? And I think we have a disconnect about the value and the price of public sector. But if you could get things to be worked on a kind of ratio of, we will do this and recover a number, be it, we will be less than what we cost. And what if we didn't? I think, David, you've challenged elected members on this, as I have. What would we didn't need to charge council tax at all, or even any tax? Because I used to joke that, tax, most people think tax is robbed off them anyway. They don't know where their tax is going now, but they know that they're paying far too much. But again, we want the country defended, we want good public services, but we tend to not admit that we need to pay for it, as if we were going to buy a McDonald's or any other product where we can work out what the value of it is to us. And we need to get customers closer to what the value is of council services, not being homeless anymore. You can't charge for that, but you can value it as the avoidance of risk and damage to my family life. And so what I'm trying to get at is, I do think we need these motivating ratios to get people to work on what, Richard, you've helpfully outlined as a more outcome business benefit type of project management focus, where digital can help. It might not be digital that's helping the most. It could be, we need a better culture here, or we need to respect our customers better, etc.
I was going to say, I dislike digital transformation as a phrase anyway. I think there's transformation and then I focus on digital efficiency, and that's almost how efficient can you pass the data between the two. You look at any big company, you take Netflix as an example. The analog process used to be getting in your car, driving to Blockbuster, finding that they didn't have the film that you wanted, picking something else that you didn't really want to watch, but you were there, so you would, and then getting up the next morning and driving back. Now, they took one step forwards by moving that to send out a DVD in the post. I think in the UK it was called Love Film originally. You could keep that for as long as you wanted and then send it back when you're ready. And then the next jump was the most efficient way is actually to send it over the internet. And again, you talk about Netflix. At no point do I interact with a person at Netflix. They've built the system, the tools and everything else. I go on and do that. So there's a lot that we can think about. If we think about, we need to transform, that's one thing. But then if from an efficiency perspective, how do we take these processes and make them the most efficient possible? If you're doing that, then I think what people almost regard as digital transformation naturally happens, because the most efficient way to do it probably isn't the way you're doing it now. And if you said to Blockbuster, what's the most efficient way of delivering this? They probably would have told you that the most efficient way was over the internet, but their business model was based on late fees and fines coming in, and that's where they wanted to stick. Kodak similarly wanted to focus on, I think, paper and print over digital cameras and everything else. And there's multiple examples of where the business model hasn't adapted, and the company has therefore got it wrong. And these new guys who've come in and gone, what's the most efficient way of doing this? And in a way, I'll say it, but I shouldn't say it. If you treat everyone as being incredibly lazy, and the fact they don't want to move from their couch and all they want to do is pick their phone up, what's the best way of delivering a service based on how lazy people actually are? And that, if again you're thinking that as a starting point, even in the world of websites, loads of council website projects happening up and down the country. Local Gov Drupal is getting bigger and bigger. I quite like it as a project. I think sharing all that infrastructure is great, but no one's really sat down and gone, why have we got a website? What do we do with it? How do we use it? How do our residents use it? Are we putting information on it because we think it's important to tell them, or have we actually asked them what's important to them to go on it? And also, are we building a website for someone to access on a laptop or desktop, knowing full well 75% of people access it off a mobile phone? And there's all sorts of questions you can bring into it.
On that very note, I'm supporting, there's a group of individuals. They're youngsters. When I say youngsters, I mean most people in the known world are younger than me. But these are 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 22-year-olds. And the other day I said, let me take a look at what's your website, and URL. And they said, we don't have a website. Basically, we use something called Discord, and what they do is they send out teasers in the form of, and some of them are quite sophisticated apps and so on. It's not just somebody standing on the chair and falling off. These are businesses. They send out a little sort of teaser, hint, whatever, by TikTok. So it gets your audience. Then you go to the Discord server, and there's these kids. They're earning just for providing the services that they do. They're earning 25 grand a month. They're earning 80 grand a month. They're earning in one case just shy of £1 million a month. No website, just providing a contact service that delivers the product seamlessly, either moving it into the physical world or keeping it in the digital world.
Well, you look at so many. When I was kind of back at head of IT 5-6 years ago, nearly every council in the country blocked YouTube as a channel. You just couldn't access it. And yet you're sat there going, well, hang on a minute. If the council had a YouTube channel, you could create videos on how do I apply for, what's the process for this, how do I do this? And you could have a bank of little videos. You can do screen recordings of this is how I fill this in. And again, tools like Calendly that say you can book a session with us, private one-to-one session. You don't have to put your calendar out to the world. It just gives you the slots that are available. So when you're thinking about delivering services differently, I use planning as a good example. There's no reason why a planning department can't have a webinar every Monday afternoon that people can just jump on and ask questions and have like a surgery. Or you can have the videos that are created. You can use Zoom, you can use Teams as webinars. You can do all sorts, but things like that fall down because people don't think councils should or can use them. But also, when you look at a tool like Calendly, and it's quite basic, it's simple, it's a couple of quid a month, if that, to buy it. Immediately councils go, oh, we need a booking tool. Let's buy a corporate booking tool that's going to cost us 40 grand a year. But actually you're going, well, no, we just need 3 licenses for planning. So let's just buy 3 licenses for planning because, again, we've identified a problem, we're solving a problem for them. Not everything has to be a corporate solution or a corporate answer. And what you will end up with is probably a larger IT estate with more tools on it, but a lot of those will be software as a service. So you don't really need to do much with them. But again, you're using digital to help the department deliver the best service they can deliver. And I think we kind of restrict ourselves a little bit and going, A, we want to shrink the application estate. You don't need to, you could double the application estate. It doesn't necessarily mean you've got any more work to do. Or B, we're going to cut investment into IT and make some savings. Well, again, all you're doing there is saying, well, instead of having this solution to this team, we're going to give you one that's not as good. So what's the impact of that on guys in social care if you've given them a system that it might have saved IT 50 grand a year, but actually you've cost them £500,000 a year because they can't deliver as effectively or as efficiently. And although they don't, we still struggle a little bit with the commercial world, you're still looking at that kind of coming back to what's the difference between income and profit. So how we've made a saving here, but the knock-on effect of making that saving is we've lost money elsewhere. So we still need to visit that with a bit more of a commercial thought process to actually double the IT budget, because if we double the IT budget and that goes from 2 million to 4 million, but that allows us to make 10 million of savings across the organization, double the IT budget. Stop trying to cut everything to the bare minimum, because the way the world's going, it's only going one way. Digital tools, smartphones, tablets, everything is going to take over. And as you say, Dave, people aren't on kind of websites and stuff anymore. The younger kid, my son would have a fit if I said build a website. It's like he's on TikTok, he's looking at reels, he's watching YouTube videos. That's where they are now. So it's just a case of adapting and kind of catching up a little bit. And even if you just start that slowly, and we're going to have a few YouTube videos dotted across our website, it's a good start.
I'm just wondering though, some of the no to the YouTube videos in planning is perhaps more the culture of the planners. And I love a lot of planners, and don't at me, but you know, why would we do that? Because we don't want to make it easy for them to have to make an application, or it makes my job harder to have more people asking me where my application's gone.
But if you do that, Andrew, then again, coming back to that, the knock-on effect of not doing that is suddenly you've got 500 phone calls
frustrated
to the contact centre saying, where's my app? And them saying, I'll get someone to call you back. So
I think the answer lies in, the stat, you know, by 2025, we always used to say that, you know, a good half of your staff will be Gen Zs and people that are used to not having screens or websites, because that's like a book online, isn't it? You have to read words. It's not accessible for people with different abilities, blah, 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 blah. The Gen Zers, like David says, want to have things that they put in their pocket that's voice activated, that's sort of fractal, that's not all big system. I think that will be a big shift as those people become senior planners, senior civil servants and senior social care officers, who will say, well, this is what I want. My customers use this in their life. I use it. Why am I working to like a central plan? And perhaps to tie back to our first first podcast, David, and thinking of the time and you know, people watching, back to your point, I think you said in the last one, if we thought of an organisation like a council more as a holding company with responsibilities to its satellite departments, both for the good of the whole, the buildings and the paying conditions, I suppose, although that's arguable. And if the subsidiaries within it could do, as Richard says, innovate within their area to satisfy their own particular needs. You mentioned social care versus the IT department. You perhaps wouldn't have this kind of centrist sort of, it all must fit into a corporate sort of cultural or philosophical whole, and it might allow the holding company to play different departments and services. Some are more discretionary or totally discretionary, some are statutory, all need help in the bath water of sort of policies and sort of democracy of the organization, but to let them loose a bit, to allow them to innovate. I don't know if that does play to your point. Anyway, David's not sure you can hear me.
Sorry, yeah. I thought you
were talking about holding companies, weren't you?
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think that trying to provide a universal service across everything is different. I think you're going to have different rules and different, dare I say it, different cultures in different departments. Some of them are just going to be there for the community and funded by the commerciality and the efficiencies that are gained in other departments. And I think why not pay people differently? That, I know that will cause a few ripples. Why not give people bonuses? Unless can sense people falling backwards against the wall, clutching their chest.
Someone wrote a green book 25 years ago.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm conscious that we're burning up your time, Richard. So sorry for that, but thanks for donating your time, and we hope that we'll see you again, and maybe what might be useful in the intervening period is if you could come up with some anonymous scenarios, sort of condense a number of typical issues that councils face and why the strategy and the thinking and the philosophy that you are propounding, which I think is the only way actually, why is that getting stopped or stalled or diverted?
Perhaps it's not. Perhaps in his areas that they're racing ahead.
Can I answer in one sentence?
Yeah.
Not enough people outside of IT understand what IT or digital should be doing and what they should be focusing on, and therefore IT are left to come up with their own ideas, and therefore you end up doing the wrong thing better than what you were doing, rather than seeing it as a complete end-to-end business process.
Well, I think that's a good point to call it a day, because I'm conscious of the audience. So, Richard, see you again very soon, and Andrew will be on it again very, very shortly.
Yes, I'm sure. Thank you very much,
right.
Richard.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.